You're listening to Twins Takes, the Minnesota Twins podcast.
Play ball!
And welcome into Twins Takes. I'm Twins Central, joined here today by Troy and Twins Insider as the Twins are coming off a series split with the Toronto Blue Jays, but suffering a big blow Sunday afternoon as Joe Ryan left the game after just two batters. Troy, Insider, how are you guys doing?
Feeling good today. It was a good win today, honestly, but Joe Ryan going down does really worry me a bit.
Yeah, a little bit mixed emotions, but it's always fun to have nice spring weather. How are you doing, Central?
I'm doing good. This was a fun weekend series. It's always fun when Toronto's in town because the park is packed, usually, sadly, with, 60% Blue Jays fans, but it was a fun atmosphere, one of the better series throughout the year, and it seems like it's always on a weekend, so it's fun to follow along with.
Speaking of which, any news today?
Breaking news.
Well, I got some bad news for you.
Extra.
Good news, everyone.
It's time for the news.
As mentioned a moment ago, the Twins went 2-2 in a 4-game weekend set with the Blue Jays. They're now done with the Blue Jays for the year. They did win the season series 4-3. So in the off chance it comes down to a tiebreaker at the end of the year, the Twins would have that advantage. There was some negative news. Cole Sands placed on the 15-day IL with a right forearm strain. We saw John Klein get called up. He made his major league debut yesterday. Troy, why don't you tell us about Klein and where he comes from and how he looked yesterday?
Yeah, John Klein's a former undrafted free agent back in 2022. He's a Minnesota native. Down at AAA this year, he had an over 7 ERA and about 7 appearances, 6 starts. His fastball averages around 94. He's had a quick rise through the major league system. So it's really impressive that he's, as a Minnesota native, he gets to play for his, home childhood team. Had a scoreless inning yesterday's blowout loss in the 9th inning, scoreless inning in front of about 30 of his family and friends. I believe that's what they said on the broadcast. Just a really great moment for him. Yeah,
I was at the game yesterday, and his group of family was sitting a few sections down, and they were really excited, really riled up for the scoreless inning. So that was fun to see him get a scoreless outing, even if the game didn't go the way the Twins wanted to. The ERA at AAA is a little high, but he was being used as a starter. As Troy mentioned, that's obviously not the role he's going to have with the Twins, so you can probably throw that out the window. A guy that the Twins got rid of, Zach Kent, a reliever that they claimed off waivers at the start of the season, was claimed by the Washington Nationals, who the Twins go to face this upcoming week. However, he was optioned to AAA, so the Twins won't see Zach Kent. And then another unfortunate injury, Emmanuel Rodriguez, sliding into first base, injured his thumb. It was released by Theo Tollefson that it is a muscle strain. He's expected to be out just a few days. He wasn't in the lineup Sunday afternoon. He's expected to return early next week, but this is just frankly a stupid play by Emmanuel Rodriguez, sliding into first base in a minor league game, a guy that's had thumb injuries throughout the course of his minor league career.
Yeah, I feel like Matt Wallner has like some kind of voodoo doll of everyone who could possibly take his job. Alan Rodin, a serious shoulder injury last week. Emmanuel Rodriguez with, like you said, a really stupid injury to this weekend. And then Walker Jenkins on Sunday afternoon crashed into the wall trying to make a catch, and he apparently has a shoulder injury that may be pretty bad. So, like I said, if you're a Matt Wallner fan, it was a great weekend.
Yeah, unfortunately it comes at the cost of the 3 best prospects in the Twin systems getting injured in some way, shape, or form. Even if they're maybe not be serious, it's always cautious. It's always cautious to look at these kinds of injuries, especially with the injury history that Rodriguez has, and Jenkins has had some injuries in the past as well. So, just really unfortunate, but thankfully, hopefully, it's just day-to-day, like for guys like Cole Pepper and Rodriguez. Cole Pepper also is day-to-day. He got hit by a pitch on Saturday. He won't return before Wednesday, so, but at some point, he will return in their series, which St. Paul is going on the road to Las Vegas this upcoming week.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on those two guys, Culpepper and Rodriguez, to see if they return as planned, and then we'll have more information, hopefully, on Walker Jenkins next episode. Travis Adams' rehab was complete. He was optioned to St. Paul, so that's just a procedural move. And then Andrew Morris today came in to follow up Joe Ryan. He earned his first major league win, went 3 2/3 innings, was really effective, didn't give up a run. So congrats to Andrew Morris on his first big league win.
Yeah, shout out Andrew. He's done a really good job in a lot of different roles now. He's pitched long relief, fireman, and kind of basically was functionally a spot start today. And he did it in front of a good crowd. 20.3 thousand today, 30.6 on Saturday, 19.7 and 16.9 on Friday and Thursday. Again, these Blue Jays games are always great crowds, even half or more of it was Blue Jays people, but it's always good to see a ballpark more full than empty, and that's what we had this weekend.
Yeah, and thankfully they got to see Andrew Morris pitch really well today, I think. Now, main topic around that is because Joe Ryan comes down with a right elbow soreness, as they said, after he was taken out of his start today. Only faced 2 batters. His fastball velo was down a couple of ticks, and that's really concerning. At first, I thought, feels more procedural than not, but right elbow soreness obviously is not what you want to see from especially the guy that's basically your bona fide ace right now. You already have Pablo Lopez out with that Tommy John surgery. So, in Joe Ryan's case, really concerning to, see him come down with this injury right now.
Yeah, not only is Joe Ryan the Twins' best pitcher, he's also the Twins' best trade chip. We saw last year, we thought maybe he got moved to the Red Sox. And if the Twins continue down this path of losing through, late July here, he was almost certainly going to be traded with only a year and a half of control left. We'll see what the official diagnosis is here, hopefully before Tuesday on whether he's going to be placed on the IL. It's almost a guarantee that he will be, but we'll see if it's like Mick Abel, where he's just going to miss a handful of games, or whether this is going to be, potentially Tommy John or something of that nature. Hopefully it's not, but when you hear elbow injury, you always fear the worst.
Yeah, I think we could be negative about Ryan. Obviously, it's not what you want to hear. I'll try to spin it a little positively. Again, I really liked what we saw from Morris today. Just want to highlight that again. 3.2 innings, kind of on short notice. 2 hits, 3 strikeouts, 1 walk, 8 whiffs. Fastball sitting 95. It touched 97. That's a really good outing just in general, but especially on kind of an emergency basis. I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, he was pitching on 2 days rest, basically. He pitched earlier in the series and pitched an inning in the third in the win Thursday. So again, basically two full days off, and then you're just kind of thrown into this role. And he handled it really great. He handled it very well. Again, as a rookie, it's hard to step into those kinds of situations, and him being in these, like you mentioned, in these variety of roles, and him not really having a, I would say, consistent outing yet. Today was the sharpest he's looked, I think, on a big league mound. Again, the velo looked really good, really good. He got a couple of whiffs, 8 exact to be exact, and just didn't give up a lot of contact in general. Only 2 hits, just the one walk. It's really encouraging, just to see him in this role and do really well. Now, I still think that, he's not for sure he's going to be used in a variety of ways. That's just how he is right now. That's what this bullpen and pitching staff needs. But either way, regardless, it's a really impressive outing in my eyes.
Yeah, we talked about his role a little bit last time, me, Will, and Twins Insider. We wanted to see him in some more short inning appearances. We saw that on Thursday. He was effective. He got out of a big jam in the 7th inning and then pitched a clean 8th inning. So I thought we were maybe headed down to see him, only pitching in that role exclusively. Then Joe Ryan throws a wrench into the plan. He has to extend back out here for a longer outing. I think he threw somewhere in the 50, 60 pitch mark here on Sunday afternoon. He was still really effective. In prior outings, we saw him get through the first 2 innings, unscathed, and then he'd get to that 3rd or 4th inning and would kind of fall apart. It was good to see him here today when they had a winnable game. He went out there, he got outs, he didn't, miss his spots, he didn't give up a lot of hard contact. So well done by Andrew Morris.
But another negative news just in general, the lineup's kind of been up and down a bit, and Royce Lewis, it hasn't really been talked about enough, I think, of his struggles ever since he initially came back from his IL stint. Is a 598 OPS overall in the season, 176 average, basically the same offensive numbers as a Matt Wallner, who fans have been a lot more obvious about him, wanting him sent down. Royce is 2 for his last 18. What do you guys think right now of his struggles at the plate?
Well, I hate to say it, but he's been a bad hitter for almost 3 years now. Been middle of 2024, all of 25, and then this year now he's been a below average hitter. At some point, it's not a slump. It's not fluky. It's not anything. It's just who he is.
Yeah, just to echo what Insider said, he had a 106 WRC plus in 2024, but that was with a good first half and a pretty poor second half. Then last year in 106 games, just an 85 WRC plus, and then this year it's all the way down to 78. Granted, we are only 20 games into the season for Royce Lewis. He was good before he got injured, or at least he showed some power. He's striking out quite a bit, 28.7% of the time. Throughout his career, he's been in that lower 20 mark. So the strikeouts are up. The walks are actually up quite a bit. He's at 11.3. His previous high was 8.6%. But what I've noticed is just a lot of pop-ups, and the defense also wasn't real good. He had a play this afternoon where he maybe could have made it on that Miles Straw, weak hit. It would have been a nice play if he made it, but it's one that you expect a third baseman to at least, make an attempt on. He didn't even barehand the ball and get a throw off.
Yeah, it's really concerning, at least in my eyes, although I don't really have a lot of expectations for him at this point. And that's, kind of the sad part, given where he was as a player and as the face of this franchise, arguably 3 years ago. But it's unfortunate where he is. But just to me, at least, it's not really shocking that he's had his struggles, and because he's just been inconsistent, like insiders said, the last 3 years. And, it's really hard to see him get better from this spot. Maybe, he'll show off a power in a couple of series, but I just really don't see anything good to say about Lewis, and that's really sad.
There was something symbolic about, obviously what he did against the Blue Jays a couple of years ago is kind of been the peak of the Twins franchise in the last 25 years, honestly. And to see him just kind of be really feeble in this series against the same team, making some of the same pitchers even, it kind of symbolizes how far things have fallen in not that long of a time.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this with Bailey Ober a few episodes ago, like with his velo. Is this just kind of who he is now? Is this what you expect out of him? I have that same question with Royce Lewis. Like, do you guys think this is just what Royce Lewis is, or do you have hope that he, not necessarily back to like the superstardom that he was in 2022 and 2023, but do you think like he's just best case like an average player?
I think that's just kind of what you have to hope for at this point, that he's also just an league average defender at third base, which, he's never been bad at defensively up and really until this year at third base. It's like, you just hope he gets back to that. And then you hope that, the power can show up in spurts again. But, you can't really, I haven't really expected much from him this year. And it's hard for me to expect more or even less.
I think Royce is, you saw it this year and you've seen this a bunch. I think he's fine until he gets hurt. And then he's obviously kind of playing hurt and playing in, 50th percentile or whatever. So again, I think if we were playing MLB The Show and you could turn injuries off, I think he'd be still a pretty good player. But since he's basically always hurt, I think the whole package, this is kind of what you're going to get from now on. And that actually transitions to our next little segment, which is what has stood out to us, in this first full month. And for me, it's frankly that Gray and Kreidler at third base there's been more stability and more consistency than Royce Lewis, which is incredible to say, but I think it's true.
Yeah, that just shows you how far Royce has fallen off. And look, we're not breaking any news when we say like injuries have had a huge impact on Royce's career. Like when he came up as a prospect, he was a guy that was, 85, 90th percent sprint speed. Now he can hardly get up the line, although he does have a few stolen bases. So the way he's had to play has just really changed his game due to those injuries, which is really unfortunate. It's been a story with many Twins prospects, not just Royce Lewis. Alex Kirilloff, another one that comes to mind. But in regards to your question of who stood out after the first month, for me, it's definitely Ryan Jeffers. He's a guy I didn't really know what to expect coming into a walk here. He's a guy who has his mind on free agency, going out and making as much money as he can after this year, and he's showing the power that he showed off in prior years. Last year, I believe he only hit 9 home runs, but this year he's already up to, I think, 4 or 5. And, he's just really hitting well. Every time he comes up to the plate, you feel like he's going to come through.
Yeah, Jeffers has definitely stood out, after there was some questions again going into this season and whether or not he's an extension, he could be an extension candidate or not. Right now, I am very pro extension candidate, especially just because good hitting catchers just don't come up as often. And Jeffers has gotten better defensively thanks to ABS, and he's just looked a lot more confident at the plate as well. He's starting to become a really well-rounded player again. Now, just in terms of who I think has stood out, I'm going different than Connor Prelip. In 3 starts I've seen of him, he's looked really good. And, you kind of expect older prospects to perform well right off the gate, I think. But, just for what this team needs after Mick Abel went down, and he would have been a guy I would say I was really impressed with through the first month of the year, but just through 3 starts, I think Philip has shown the strikeout stuff. He's limited damage, and against 3 pretty decent lineups as well, I think, for any young lefty to come up against. He's looked really good. And just in general, I think he's really what this rotation needed after Abel went down. Now, just in terms of anyone that's disappointed me, I think it's anybody at first base. You mentioned Josh Bell. We've mentioned how we've talked about how bad he's looked over the last few weeks. Victor Carantini as well. Cody Clemens has started to hit the ball a little bit as of late, but just in general, the three collectively that have played first base, it's not been encouraging.
Yeah, on the negative side, that's who it is going to be for me, as well as Josh Bell. He's a guy that I expected not necessarily good defense out of, but I thought he was a guy you could put in the 5 or 6 hole and you could expect, okay batting average. He doesn't strike out a ton, draw some walks, hit some power. We saw some power early on in the season, but that just completely gone away. Over his last 14 days, he has just a 357 OPS. I mean, that's just absolutely awful especially for a guy that, you paid good money for, at least the Twins circumstances, good money. You're still relying on him to hit in the 3 or 4 hole. He's, hitting behind Buxton, he's hitting behind Larnach or Martin, who are getting on base fairly frequently, but he just doesn't come through at all.
No, and to beat a dead horse, I mean, it's for a guy who also doesn't play any defense, and when he does, it's a train wreck. He has to be able to hit, and Caratini's the same thing. He's mostly a backup. He has to be able to hit. A bunch of the veterans have disappointed me in that way, but it's hard to say I was that surprised by it, except for maybe Bell. Bell's been a pretty consistent hitter, but a lot of the veterans have been exactly who you thought they might be. Cody Clemens, Josh Bell, Caratini. You could go on.
Yeah, a veteran in a good way that we thought they would be. Byron Buxton, he's homered in 10 of his last 18 games and 5 of his last seven games, so he's really on a heater here. He got off to a slow start, the WBC, definitely impacting him, but he's really turned it on here as of late. And then the Twins win this afternoon against Toronto, kind of in a roundabout way. Their first one-run win of the year was 3 runs in the 9th inning. Then Topa gave up 2 runs. Okamoto hit his 4th home run of the series, just absolutely dominated the Twins. But they're finally the last team in Major League Baseball to have a 1-run victory.
Something that you don't want to hear in the beginning of May after 1 full month of baseball. But regardless, they got that win out of the way.
Yes, they did. I want to shout out my guy, Justin Topa. Also not something that you want to hear in May, but the Twins finally have a reliever with multiple saves. He got save number 2 on the year today. It was a little bit of a rocky road, a home run, a couple hits, but a lot of hard contact. But there is a Twin with more than 1 save now. So congratulations.
Yeah, you were definitely flying by the seat of your pants there. That ball that was hit by Lenine Sosa in the 9th inning, I thought it was going to get through the middle. Keishel made a pretty good play on it, and Lee got him by 3 or 4 steps, so you could finally let your breath out. In other news, Matt Wallner and Austin Martin seem to be alternating starts against right-handed pitchers. This is something we had asked for over the last few weeks. Shelton seems to be obliging, so Martin's definitely seen more playing time over the last 2 or 3 weeks here, especially against righties. He's in there every game against lefties. And then another guy that I know Twins Insider is a big fan of, Zebby Matthews. Why don't you tell us how he's been doing lately for the Saints?
Yeah, like I've always been a big Zebby fan. I've always said he could be an ace. Maybe not quite that anymore, but his last 2 starts at St. Paul have been really good. 5 innings pitched, 1 run, 7 strikeouts. So I sort of was hoping he'd maybe come up and help in the bullpen, but with a Joe Ryan injured list stint more or less, guaranteed, Zebby's going to come up probably whenever that next start will be. So I guess that'd be Friday or Saturday against Cleveland. And, you hope to see that high strikeout, that good velocity, that swing and miss, limiting walks. This is still, I know he started the year in AAA, but this is still a huge year for Zebby. This is probably his last year to prove that he's not a reliever.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about who you think, assuming Joe Ryan, which we all are, assuming he lands on the IL here. I think it's either going to be Kendry Rojas or Zebby Matthews to replace him in the rotation until Mick Abel's back. Then they'll have a decision to make at that point. But I think we're probably a week or 2 from that, being a real case. So do you think it'll be Zebby? Do you think it'll be Kendry Rojas? I personally think it'll be Zebby.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Zebby. He has the most starting experience out of those 2. Rojas is still a bit of a project at the moment, and Zebby has a decent amount of major league experience behind his back. It hasn't really been the results he's wanted, but he's shown some upside. There's some flashes. There's some skill. There's something there still there with Zebby, you'd think. So hopefully he's going to get another shot, and hopefully he capitalizes on this opportunity.
Yeah, and like Insider mentioned, you kind of have to figure out if he's going to be a viable starter at the major league level. The only way to figure that out is by giving him innings. So it remains to be seen what the move is there. We all think it'll be Zebby, so we'll find out in just a few days. After this quick break, we'll share our series takeaways, take a look at the minor league player of the week, and then preview the upcoming 3-game set in DC. Stick with us. And welcome back into Twins Takes. Still here with Troy and Twins Insider as we continue to break down the weekend set with Toronto before taking a look at the upcoming 3-game set in Washington, D.C. Now we'll share our series takeaways. Mine is just that the bullpen is so bad that it makes evaluating the rest of the team so difficult because they lose so many games in excruciating fashion. And it puts guys under microscopes that they wouldn't normally be under. We've seen Shelton, rely on starters in the 7th inning when if you had a good bullpen, they definitely wouldn't be out there. And, they give up runs. It makes their ERA look worse. So I think the bullpen is so bad that it just makes evaluating the rest of the team that much more difficult.
My main takeaway from this series is that I was really impressed with, some of the swings Luke Keeschel had. And specifically today, he broke 3 balls to the outfield. He had 2 extra base hits, including an RBI double that basically helped the Twins pull away from the Blue Jays a little bit. The numbers still don't look great. It's still just above a 580 OPS, but especially in the series against a team like the Nationals, where they're going to face objectively really bad starting pitching and a really underwhelming bullpen as well. I'm really interested to see if Keeschel can find a bit of a groove here and maybe work his way up towards the top of the order again, like he was at the start of the season. And if he does, it's really important. It'll be really important for this team and this offense to really get going and be in a consistent groove.
Keeschel getting back to form is maybe one of the most important things for this team to start winning some more games. And I want to shout out quickly, Will's takeaway was kind of what we just talked about as far as until Abel's back, who's going to take some of those rotation reps. Is it going to be Rojas? Is it going to be Zebby? Again, we kind of addressed that already. But my takeaway is sadly with the Ryan injury that the haters in the offseason were definitely have been kind of proven right. They said, trade away Ryan, trade away anybody that's left with any value. And then when you have a Pablo injury, you have a Ryan injury, you have a bullpen operating at its absolute really low floor. It's hard to argue with the 95.7%. It's hard to argue with the haters right now.
Well, I think that in terms of that, area of the fan base, I also think it's just hard to predict injuries. And if you're pretty much going to say before the season, like, hey, like, what if this guy gets hurt? What if this guy gets hurt? That's just a lot. That's a lot of, banking on like getting an injury like this. And like, yes, that happens. It's just sometimes the nature of the sport, I think. And if they get hurt, oh well, like it just happens sometimes. And you can continue to be like, what if they traded him? Like, yeah, but they didn't. Like that was their decision. And if it's a good or bad decision or not, that's up for debate. But it's hard. It's hard. I think it's just to judge like that they should have done this because this could happen. Like that's just not how front offices operate.
I think their argument would be, and I didn't agree with it at the time, but I think in hindsight it's easy to agree. There's not a lot of depth, and you're going to have good players get hurt. When you have both your 1 and your 2 starter get hurt, that's a little hard to predict. But like the other part of the argument was that the bullpen is terrible, and obviously that was correct at the time. That was easy to see at the time, and that's what's been true up to now.
Yeah, I kind of just want to echo what Insider said there. Like, even if you do have Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan healthy for 30 starts each out of the year, like they're not going to help you get outs in the 8th inning when you're turning to Luis Garcia. So I think it was easy to envision this being the case. It's played out basically how I expect it to be out. And just on the injury front, like the impact of the guys that are hurt, they had Pablo go out in spring training and now Joe Ryan is a question mark, but they've largely been pretty healthy. Like the hitters side of it, it's really only been Royce Lewis that's landed on the IL. So while the talent that they've lost is like high-end talent, the amount of injuries has actually been pretty low this far.
Yeah, we're not having one of those years where like Tim Beckham and Jake Cave are both are hitting 5 and 6 yet. We've seen those years, and that's not what's happening here.
Yeah, and I mean, there's still plenty of time for that to happen. Hopefully it doesn't. We've already seen it kind of take out, the top prospects here at AAA. Speaking of prospects, time for our minor league player of the week. This week it's outfielder Jamie Farrer. I don't think I'm saying that right. I'm probably not. He's at Cedar Rapids. He was 7 for 21 this week. That's a .333 average. He hit 4 homers, 2 doubles, 10 RBIs, and did draw a walk. He's a 4th-round pick out of Florida State in the 2024 draft. He's not a top 30 prospect, hasn't got off to a great start here. As a draftee in the last few years, he has a minor league OPS of just 720, but he did have a good week here for the Colonels.
Going around the American League Central like we do weekly, the Tigers were 2-3 this week. They have Sunday Night Baseball coming against Texas. They have 3 against Boston and 3 at Kansas City coming up. Casey Mize and Javier Baez, just a couple of players placed on the injured list. Hao-Yu Lee has recently just been called up, one of their top prospects, to replace Baez. And of course, they're dealing with the Casey Mize injury as well. So guys like Peter Montero have gotten more of a chance to start. And the Guardians went 3-4 this week. They just lost their game against the Athletics, just went final. They have 4 at Kansas City this week and then 3 next week against Minnesota, their favorite team to play against in the regular season in division. Second baseman Travis Pisano, one of their top prospects, the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft, just recently got called up. It's been an okay start for him. Took him a couple at bats to get his first hit, but he has gotten on base. He has struck out a little bit, but decent start for him overall.
Yeah, and the Chicago White Sox are red hot, 5-0 this week, currently playing a tie game against the Padres. They have 3 upcoming against the Angels and then 3 versus the Mariners. They're, of course, the Japanese phenom Murutaka Murakami has had a great start to the year, tons of power. Again, it's an interesting guy to keep an eye on because his price range was feasible for the Twins and some of these smaller market teams. So definitely a guy we'll continue to monitor. Their starting pitching staff also has kind of a no-name starting staff. Is tied for the 6th lowest ERA in the majors right now at 3.70. So again, they're kind of a similar team, not a big payroll, a lot of young talent, kind of cobbled it together. So interesting to keep an eye on them, see what they do with this next coming weeks and coming months.
Yeah, and then the Kansas City Royals are starting to play a little bit better baseball over the last few weeks. They're 3-2 this week, and they're still playing Seattle as we record this. They're up late in that one. And then they play Cleveland for 4, as mentioned, and then they also host Detroit for 3. So 2 American League foes there for them. Second baseman Jonathan India, he's done for the season with a shoulder injury. So a minor blow to them. I mean, he's a guy that took a lot of at-bats. I mean, he's not really a great player, but he's a guy that was in their plans. So they're without Jonathan India for the rest of the year.
And now transitioning into the Twins' next upcoming series against the Washington Nationals. They're 16-19, but have one of the better offenses in the National League overall. 177 runs scored, 37 home runs, 32 stolen bases. They do steal a lot of bases. They have the current stolen base leader in baseball in Nasim Nunez. They're 16th in WRC+, but it's their pitching staff that's been the downfall for them currently. 28th in terms of ERA in the league, 27th in K per 9, 22nd in bullpen win probability added, and 26th in OAA with -7. They have been not great in the field, not great pitching-wise. Their first matchup coming up on Tuesday, as the Twins have an off day tomorrow. Taj Bradley against Cade Cavalli. The question we're posing here is, will we see Josh Bell get fewer at-bats with Martin starting to emerge and take a lot more at-bats against righties? I think personally that's the case. That's going to be the case for the Twins.
Well, we've already seen it these last couple of days. It'll manifest in terms of Josh Bell getting less at-bats. Maybe some, Bell at first, Clemens not playing, Wallner maybe DHing or not playing, but I think Martin has been better than any of those guys at the plate. So whatever you have to move and shake to make that work, I think we're going to see Martin play almost every day until he cools off.
Yeah, I think we're at the point in this season, like it's been a month now. It's not just 2 hot weeks for Austin Martin. I mean, granted, it's still not a sample size where you can take too much away from it, but it's been enough where I think you just have to play Austin Martin. If you have 6 games in a week, he's got to play 5 times, whether it's against a righty or a lefty. We've seen him do that. If that's at the expense of Josh Bell, I mean, that's just something you have to do. We talked about how awful Bell's been. Then in game 2 at 5:45 Central Time, first pitch, Bailey Ober gets the ball. He's 3-1, 3.55 ERA. Against Miles Michaelis, the former Cardinal, is off to a dreadful start for the Nationals. 0-3, 8.23 ERA, a whip of 1.72, so battling traffic consistently. My question for this one is, are you guys back in on Bailey Ober, or do you think this is just kind of a unsustainable stretch where he's gotten, pretty good batted ball luck? The strikeouts are still very low for Bailey Ober.
Yeah, I think honestly, in terms of Bailey Ober's case, I think, it may be a little bit unsustainable, but in terms of just eating the innings that this pitching staff needs, and still being able to give up not a lot of contact, or just in contact in general, hard contact or not. He's gone 6 innings in each of his last 4 starts, and the only start he didn't go for 6 innings was he still went 5 2/3. The velo's obviously been down, but we just kind of accepted it at this point, and he's been effective regardless of the velo so far at the beginning of the year. Am I concerned about it being a little bit fake? maybe, but right now he's a guy who is pretty consistent throughout each of his first few seasons in the big leagues. If we disregard last season, so he's a guy that does, if he puts up the results, he usually consistent. So I think I don't think it starts fake really at all right now.
Yeah, the guy that I'm concerned about in this game is actually Michaelis. We've oftentimes struggled with him, even though he basically throws junk. I think you can look at Ober and you can look at the next game, which is going to feature Simeon Woods Richardson. Ober, they don't, neither of them throw hard, but Ober has that extension. He has some effective off-speed pitches. He really does keep the contact weak. He gets chased. I think Ober's, I don't think he'll be elite by any means, but I think he'll have an okay ERA and he'll eat innings. Like I said, the concern I have is more game 3. It's SWR, who's 0-5 with a 6.49. He's going to be taking on Jake Irvin, who's 1-4 with a 4.93 and a 1.23 whip. That's going to be game 3. That's going to be a 12:05 Central start. Again, I don't think we all like Ober here. I think the question really more is Simeon.
Yeah, we've talked about Simeon plenty. He does have an extended lease on life here with Joe Ryan's injury, assuming that he's going to miss time. Again, we've made it that assumption throughout the podcast. If that isn't the case, obviously we'll be thrilled to hear that. But I think with the elbow injury, you just have to assume he's going to at least miss probably a month here. Best case scenario. My question is, we thought Abel would come back and maybe push Sim out of the rotation. Now, he gets, maybe another month here. Can he take advantage, or do you guys think like he's just cooked and is, going to be a reliever in 2 months?
I think right now, like, this is in the next, like, say 2 or 3 starts, probably 5 at this point. He has like 5 starts to really get back on track. And against the Nationals lineup that, is on paper very good, and they have one of the best young hitters in the league in James Wood, it's going to be hard for him to, get on track against a kind of lineup that, again, hits for power and has a lot of speed around the base paths. The rest of their lineup is maybe particularly good on paper, but they get on base, they're going to steal bases. They're aggressive on the base paths. And I don't know if with the potential traffic that causes, can Sim overcome that? Maybe, but it's really hard for him. It's really hard for anyone to have confidence in him right now, given how his last few starts have gone.
I remember a couple weeks ago when myself and Will were very low on him because his stuff has been grading out really poorly, and we don't like guys who don't get whiffs and don't get ground balls and don't keep contact soft and walk people, all the things we talked about. And since then he's put up an ERA of about 10. So it's hard to express any confidence. The defense, if he was on a better team with a better defense, maybe they could bail him out. He could kind of get back on track, get that ERA under control. But at this point, again, I'm just looking forward to that day. He's in the bullpen. He's throwing harder. Maybe he's able to get some weak contact because he's actually missing some bats and getting weak contact, missing the barrel. But I've pretty much seen about enough of him as a starter.
Yeah, I am interested to see what this Nationals lineup looks like. Troy mentioned that they're 4th in runs throughout the league. When you look at their individual players as a whole, it's really just CJ Abrams and James Wood. So if you can get through those 2 guys, you're probably going to keep the damage fairly limited. I like Sim here to have a pretty good start. I'm not saying he's going to go 7 innings, but I think he'll get through 5 or 6 here, maybe allowing 2 or 3 runs, which would definitely be one of his better starts throughout the year. Now it's time for our series predictions. I'm going to stay positive here. The Twins coming off a split with the AL champs last year, a bad NL team. I like the Twins here to go 2-1.
Hey, I like the Twins to go 2-1 as well. I agree with you on that front. And, these 2 teams are kind of similar in their issues, but, the Nationals slightly have a better offense, but I think the Twins can really, they kind of got back on track with the Thursday win. And then today they were pretty good with 2 outs hitting, especially in the 5th inning. So I like the Twins offense with their bats, especially with a guy like Kishel. I'm banking on having a really big series. I'd be really shocked if they can't get the bats going in this series, then, the season, it really is over. But, I really do think they'll have a really good series offensively. Pitching, we'll see. But I think the bats will really get going. That's why they'll be 2-1.
I like where Will's head is at. He's got him at a 1-2 this series. I think Will's on the right track. I've got an 0-3. We just get demolished by the Nationals. We struggle with Michaelis. We've gotten demolished by Irvin a couple times. Every Simeon game is a loss. Again, the Nationals are terrible. They've probably been the worst team in baseball since they won the World Series, but we just have been obliterated by them constantly in recent years. I have no confidence in them. And this particular team doesn't hit junk ball starters, and that's what we're facing in Miles Michaelis and Jake Irvin. So I would love to be wrong. I probably will be wrong, but I'm going to go 0-3.
Yeah, based off the standings here, Troy and I 6-5, tied at the top. You probably will be wrong. Insider and Falvey's Mattress, both 3-8. Troy and I predicted a split here, and then I believe both of those two predicted a 1-3 series. So we continue to, widen that gap here between Insider and Falvey's Mattress. We'll be back on Friday recapping the National Series. Please like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening, as it does help the channel grow. You can follow us on Twitter at TwinsTakesPod. And then we're looking to do another edition of hashtag AskTwinsTakes. That's hashtag AskTwinsTakes. We did one on Wednesday. If you didn't catch it, go back and listen to it. We got a few great questions. We're looking for a few more, so either use that hashtag on Twitter or in the YouTube comments. We'll get to those on the Friday episode midweek. For Troy and Twins Insider, I'm Twin Central. Goodbye, everybody.